Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we'll talk about DNS attacks and we'll spend some time discussing how they work. We're going to give some examples, of course, and before that, really quickly, we're also going to do a bit of a recap on how DNS functions to begin with. Okay, so let's get on to it. DNS is, in my opinion, one of the most underestimated areas in IT in general. And the reason I'm saying this is because, on a very high level, most, or I guess all people understand how it works, but then only a few decide to actually go deeper than that and to re-understand the mechanics behind it, which would also lead to understanding its power and why it's actually one of the most brilliant inventions of IT. Um, so, in general, what does DNS do? I guess most people would compare it to a dictionary, right? Because DNS is basically the mapping between a domain name and an IP address. And in the most basic example that we could give, um, let's say that we want to give an example with an A record, which is probably the most popular type of DNS record. Um, if I wanted to open, let's say, example.com, okay, I probably wouldn't know its IP address. So what I would do is I would instead say to my browser, open up example.com, and then it's going to, on the back end, it's going to find the IP address. Well, not the browser, just the browser itself, right? But it's a complex process going to happen on the back end in order for the IP address of the server where example.com resides it is, right. So um, I won't see the IP address in the browser, but I'm going to see the content of the web that the web server is going to show me, and it's because I have found its IP address, and this is basically what DNS do. And I'm sure this is something that most of you are already aware of, but um, again, please make sure to spend some time doing research on DNS. It's a whole world of information around how it works. There are whole books around it, etc. So I really advise spending some time on DNS. And again, everyone understands how it works on the high level, but as you go deeper, you'll find some very interesting things. And a lot of the things that you've already known from before how they work, you would now add an additional layer or additional layers of understanding to that. Um, okay, so um, now that we are on the same page about how DNS works, it's a protocol that's used almost everywhere because you need to be able to resolve um, domain names in order to get to whatever is behind them, right? So this is why there are, this is why people have thought about trying to find ways to use that in order to perform attacks. Okay, so the first attack that we're going to be looking at is so-called DNS poisoning, and um, DNS poisoning. Imagine it as, well. First of all, it's a man-in-the-middle attack. This is important to mention, and we've already talked about some other examples of man-in-the-middle attacks, and as the name implies, it's a type of attack where the attacker sits in the middle of the traffic, literally between the client and the server most of the time, and does something with the information or the data, right? They either just listen to it, or they modify it, or they change it in any way. In this case, with DNS poisoning, what the attacker does is, so let's say that this is me on here on the left, and I want to go to whatever is behind www.example.com, and I'm performing a DNS request for that. Not literally me, but let's say the computer that I'm on right now. It's trying to find what the IP address of the server where example.com lives is. If the attacker manages to install themselves in the middle of the traffic or on the path of the traffic, they might modify the answer that I receive for this request, and then I wouldn't even know that this happened, because I'm assuming that whatever happens, let's say in my browser, when I type example.com and hit enter, is what it's supposed to happen. But if the attacker managed to change the answer, change the IP address that is received as an answer to this DNS request, this means that I might type in the browser google.com, hit enter, and go to a completely different website, and it could be it's going to be a website that the attacker tricked me into going to, even though I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go to example.com, or I wanted to go to google.com, and so on and so forth. And of course, if the attacker manages to do that, then they are obviously going to send me to a malicious server of their own, where most likely a lot of bad things are going to happen without me even knowing that in the first place. Okay, so please remember that, and also remember that there's also the so-called DNS cache poisoning, where pretty much the same thing happens as we discussed so far, except that this false malicious answer is now also stored in cache, which means that it's going to be used again if another request is made for the same domain name. Okay, so there's that. Next, let's check out amplification attacks. Now, amplification attacks are a bit different than the poisoning, and they're mostly different in terms of the way that, or like the way the attacker is positioned is different. Now, the previous attack that we described was a man in the middle. This one is not like that. This one is like saying, okay, I'm the attacker, and I'm going to pretend that I'm actually this person who is making DNS requests. And then I'm going to spoof their IP address and actually present myself as them, impersonate them by saying that I'm actually that I'm sending that I'm making a DNS request as if I'm them, right? So the bad guy is making a request on behalf of the good guy. The hacker is making a DNS request towards a DNS server, but they're actually impersonating the good user. So what's going to happen is, you already know how DDoS works, right? If you send enough requests in this fashion towards the DNS server, then the response is going to come back from the DNS server. It's obviously going to be directed to the to this good guy down there at the bottom right, who didn't even know what happened. They are just going to receive a bunch of DNS answers without having sent a DNS request in the first place. And it's going to have the effect of a DDoS attack. Okay. Next, let's check out the DNS Internal Link. I think we've already mentioned, but we're going to also talk about down the road about different tunnel link attacks, because tunnel link is it's a common method for attackers to achieve their goals. Now, in this case, with DNS tunnel link, it's pretty much what you expect it to be, right? So, but let's give some specifics first. Now, DNS traffic is one of the categories of traffic that you're going to see in one environment, no matter what. You're always going to have DNS traffic, okay? And because of that, port 53 is always going to be open in the outbound direction, for example, in order for the request that you're making internally to be able, to receive their responses, right? Because every time your local DNS server does not know the answer to a particular question, they're going to ask another server in order to get to the right answer, right? So because of that, port 53, which is the port on which DNS works, is going to be open in the outbound direction. Now, what's going to happen if the bad guys, for example, manage to infect one of your machines? And then once that happens, in a command and control fashion, they're going to start generating DNS traffic from this machine towards the server that the attackers had stood up. And inside this DNS traffic, they will inject data in order to exfiltrate it. Okay? Going back to what we said a moment ago, you're always going to have DNS traffic allowed in your environment. So this data that's going to be in these packets, you probably won't even know about it until it's already too late. You won't know that it's there because it's hidden inside the DNS packets themselves. And so I'm not saying that there's not a way to catch this. I'm just saying that it brings things to a whole different level in terms of the results that the attacker is achieving, right? Because most of the time when you're looking for bad traffic, you're not looking at ports that you know what they're for, right? So 53 is DNS, so you won't be looking there if you are looking for something fishy going on in the outbound direction. And in this case, it's exactly what is happening, right? So this is basically how the tunneling works. Okay, thank you, and I'll talk to you in a bit.